Well, here it is. Bambu's worst kept secret. Sure, we all expected a follow-up to the H2D, probably with a single nozzle this time, but unless you've never heard of Reddit or live under a very smooth rock, you probably already know this exact model carries the moniker H2S. S for single, D for dual. Yeah, it's that simple. And whilst you might be sitting there thinking, I know what this is already, it's just a H2D with one nozzle. Oh, sweet summer child. There are more limits than that. But in spite of them, this genuinely may be my preferred machine of the two. And yeah, that's going to come across as a bit of a loaded statement, especially to those of you who've watched the channel for a while, because you know how much I love my D. Most days it's the only thing I play with, and I hope that appropriately sets the tone going forward. Hi, I'm Ross, and this is Fohammer Videos. Now, anyone eagle-eyed might have already spotted from the green door that Bambu sent me the laser version of this printer to review, but for review purposes, I'm treating this as a standard H2S without the laser module. In this video, I'll be assessing it purely as a printer. I'll cover the laser functions in a separate video, but don't worry, that one's coming straight after this. Now, as a printer, yeah, this is very much like a H2D. If you haven't already, go and check out that review, but for now, let's get into this one. Unboxing is straightforward, and for a machine this large, Bambu have actually considered it. Remove the lid of the box, all its foam, then you just need to lift the printer onto your worktop using these side handles. And I was slightly shamed in my last video by some people because I had to have my wife help me lift the H2D, and I just wanted to show here that I can do it on my own. Yeah, buff. Just, in terms of sensible manual handling, maybe get some help. 35 kilos is not a tiny amount, and this printer's back heavy too. After that, just continue pulling out boxes and foam. You'll need to unscrew some elements that have been secured in place for shipping and clip some cable ties. But after that, it's essentially a case of plug it in, turn it on, and let it do its own self-checks. Load up some filament, and you're ready to print. Now, speaking of loading filament, I have the combo version, which comes with an AMS2 Pro. That will actually be the only version of the H2S available at launch, whether you get the laser model or the standard. The non-combo version will be released in October 2025. If you have a non-combo version, you'll get an arm which clips to the back that you can mount your filament onto. And you do get that with this one as well, in case you choose to use it instead of the AMS for some reason. Now, looks-wise, this is very Bambu looking, isn't it? Grey plastic housing. If it were the standard version, it'd have clear glass on the front and a clear glass lid. As this is the laser version, it's got a green plastic door designed specifically to block the wavelength of diode lasers. The lid is still glass in this case, but it has a fully opaque black coating over it for exactly the same reason, to block out laser light. Now, on the H2S, we also lose the side panel windows and the light up Bambu signs. And to be fair, if that's an element which helps reduce the cost a bit, I'm all for it. Now, overall, this green door does leave the chamber a bit dark to see through when printing, but this needs to be in place for laser safety. It does, however, give a cool, eerie glow at night, like a haunted microwave, but thanks to the internal light, it doesn't awkwardly discolor any time lapses. But due to how dark this is, I want to point out that when you're using it as a laser, you actually get a full screen preview of what's going on inside the printer. It'd be handy if you had that whilst printing too, because it's difficult to see through the door when you've got the lights on in your room. But I suppose you can always watch this remotely, or open the door if you're using soft materials. Now, moving on to ports, and there's quite a lot. From top to bottom, you've got a 6-pin AMS port at the top, and for anyone unfamiliar with how they connect, one AMS just daisy chains to the next. The maximum number of AMS units you can use with this machine is 4 AMS or AMS2 Pros, and then 8 AMS HTs in any combination, and that gives you up to 24 different material slots. To the right of this, you'll see an input port for filament where you just feed in a PTFE tube. Now, below this is a port that would be for a second filament feed if you had the H2D, but checking this on the inside of the printer, all of that hardware has been removed here, so this is purely just redundant carryover from the D's chassis shape. And now is probably the most opportune time to mention it that, no, if you get a H2S, you cannot later upgrade it to a H2D, which is another place this unit has limits, and I'll keep highlighting the limits because that all adds up to my conclusion later. But the H2S also still does have a dedicated port for TPU. Now, there's also 2 4-pin ports next to the filament waste chute, and these are for accessory devices like the Cyberbrick time-lapse kit. On the website, this still only lists compatibility up to the A1 printers, but I've ordered it to test it on the H2s. Once I know if it works, I'll update the video description, and again, if there's any updates to this review because things are pointed out later, so make sure you check that out for any updates. Right at the bottom is the power socket and rocker switch, and once again though, no Ethernet port. That interface is sadly limited to the H2D Pro like it was with the X1E, which again, that's sad. Pathetic. What we also have on the rear is an air vent. Yeah, that's not my worst. Anyway, this dynamically opens and closes to exhaust and regulate chamber temperature. PLA and the like, it keeps it cool. ABS, it keeps it warm. And there's also a partnered dynamic vent on top of the machine, which operates as an air inlet at the same time the one on the rear opens up to be an outlet. And finally, we've also got a port here for a safety kill switch. Now this is required if you use the laser, but without that you do need this red key inserted. Unplug that at any point and the system won't even power up. In fact, if you unplug it when it's powered on, it'll kill power immediately. Now again, this is something a lot of us will be paying for and feel we don't need, but in reflection, it's also a handy way to secure your machine from unauthorized use when you're not around. Now speaking of the things I got wrong in my H2D review, and I'm still getting comments about, even though I updated the description and said please check the description for updates, is the sole USB port on the top just behind the LCD. And I previously mentioned that this was silly placement and could lead to that port getting easily damaged when, say, you remove the glass lid, it could knock the USB device. Of course, you wonderful lot were quick to remind me that low-profile USB drives exist. And yeah, I'm a dumbass on that. Quite a big dumbass because I actually already owned several of these. They were just hidden away in my drawer of shame right next to my self-respect. And the final interface element on the printer is the button on the top right hand corner. And like a few other bits I've mentioned, this does bugger all if you're not using the laser functionality. Right, let's jump inside. It's got all the usual stuff. A side-mounted part cooling fan, the waste chute at the back left corner, though this has been slightly redesigned now and has little toothy nozzle wipers, kinda like the A1 printers. And also like the A1, the tool head itself, aside from being a darker grey housing, looks identical to what we've got on the A1 and the A1 Mini. But it's not, because Bambu said so. Okay, the long and short of it is that they've told us that this has been completely redesigned. Okay, I'm not really interested in that level of nitty-gritty personally. What I do care about are the functional elements of this. So, on the bottom right corner of this, you can see this one has a LiDAR scanner, like in the X1. But unlike the H2D, this does not have a nozzle camera, which to be fair is a component I'd actually like if I could view it. But all it's done for me so far on that printer is perpetually and incorrectly warn me of filament buildup on the nozzle and pauses my prints for no valid reason in the middle of every night. However, the H1S is still compatible with the Vision encoder board, a build plate intended to improve accuracy, but let's be fair, I think we all know the jury is still well out on that one. I would love to see a video from Bambu showing what this does, or more to the point, what is the point of this? Now, another nice feature I love on this tool head is the spinning dial, and I know it's a small thing, but when diagnosing a clog, it is incredibly handy to externally validate that the extruder gear is actually rotating smoothly, and this is something I miss on the H2D. Now, it would be nice if this also operated as a manual crank too, so if you've got a clog, you could turn this to loosen stuff up, but no, it just pulls off the rod. Oh, shut up. And I've since learned it needs to come off because it gets in the way when you install the add-ons like the laser, the cutter and the plotter. Anyway, then there's the easily swappable nozzles. Just pull off the silicone sock, unclamp the nozzle, swap a new one in, reclip it in place and put the sock back on. Done. Now, as usual with Bambu, the printer comes with a 0.4 hardened steel nozzle, but you can also get a 0.6, 0.8 or a 0.2 stainless steel one. And high flow variants are available for the 0.4 and up, and all the profiles for the various materials are already built in to Bambu Studio. And as I briefly mentioned, yeah, like the H2D, this one still supports the cutting and plotting module and the laser head add-ons, but unlike the H2D, this printer actually ships with a smaller internal power supply. So you're limited to the 10 watt laser on the H2S, there's no 40 watt laser option available here, and no official upgrade path either, which is going to be another limit for some people, and to me, probably the most frustrating one. Right then, the build plate, or more specifically, the build volume. Let's break it down for anyone who doesn't know. The H2D with its dual nozzles technically has a build volume of 350 by 320 by 325 millimeters, but in reality you're mostly using it in single nozzle mode, which limits the width to 325. Switch to dual nozzle for something like support material, and then it drops to 300. And yeah, there are workarounds, but I honestly doubt many people are regularly using them. More often than not, this is just the limit you work to. Here, with the H2S, we've now got 340 by 320 by 340 with its single nozzle. So I'm a bit surprised we didn't get the full 350 width back, but I am pleased with the extra height thanks to the smaller tool head. But I'm also still a little disappointed that it's not a true cube. Yeah, I know. But hey, it's closer than before. I liked the cubes. It was simple, and Bambu are known for simple. That's all I'm saying. I like it when it's an equal cube. Does it matter? No, not really. Let's move on. I know I'm being petty, but I'm not alone. Anyway, that missing depth is taken up by that chunky plastic housing at the back, and that's the same plastic housing that holds the waste chute on one side and the integrated carbon filter on the other. And this also unhandily blocks easy access to the rear lead screw, which yeah, you're gonna need to reach for maintenance. And look, here's the thing. I don't care about the technical reasons why Bambu made the bed this size. Most of you know I'd pick a Bambu printer over most others anyway, and most of us would. But the point that I fumbled in my H2D review is that on paper, to many non-printing enthusiasts, this looks worse than some of its competitors in terms of build volume per footprint. And yeah, it kind of is. But the thing is, that's because people often miss the real value of Bambu printers, which now goes far beyond the it just works approach that other brands are still cheaply trying to emulate and failing because they don't get it. Bambu aren't succeeding because they have all these elements. Bambu are succeeding because they create them. And the thing is, it's so hard to show this value in a video. You really need to get hands-on with two competing machines to fully appreciate it. But that value is the whole platform. Now yes, I have to address it, Bambu is more locked down than others, especially after last year's firmware-forced Bambu software-only approach. But you can enable LAN-only mode, or, and this might sound crazy, just buy something more open if that's what matters to you more, because Bambu clearly isn't going after the tinkerer market, and that's something they've proved since releasing the A1 machines. And I've said it before, they're building for people like me, hobbyists who just want to print, and for most users that trade-off between openness and convenience, it's just not a deal breaker. And is this a slap in the face to the open source roots of 3D printing? Yeah, it absolutely is. But this isn't a Bambu thing. This is capitalism. People want easy, and people will pay more for easier. And in that space, Bambu still leads, and they lead by a clear mile, to the point that I'll continue to say that absolutely none of the other brands even get it. The only ones that even came close were AnchorMake, and I mean close to getting it, not delivering. And they're also now known as EuphieMake, and who knows if they're even still in the FDM game. But when it comes to Bambu, they almost have a monopoly now, and it's because their UI and slicer are excellent. MakerWorld is growing fast with more modules and more elements being added all the time, and they've built a proper maker ecosystem. Filaments, material, upgrades, accessories, models to print, all from the same place. They don't need to do the thing everyone's terrified of and force us into using their materials when they've got filament bundles and prices now rivaling the likes of Elegoo with 10 reels for £100 or your local equivalent. It's easy to understand why people are choosing to stay in Bambu's pen. And I'm one of them. Yes, there are other brands out there, and if you want an open printer, go and buy one of those. But generally, compared to this, when it comes to the software side and the platform, they're all an absolute mess, chasing everything that Bambu does. Now, if you're more technically minded, yeah, it makes sense to save some money and go elsewhere, at least until that printer falls apart and the brand stops supporting it in 6 months because there's a new model out. So at the end of the day, choosing to buy a Bambu is really just asking, how much is convenience worth to you? Right, so in terms of print quality, well, most people print a Benchy as their first test print, and I have printed some, wasn't my first print. My first print on this was a Lich King helmet by MakerWorld user Sortin, and then a sword. Both incredible prints, all pre-supported, and they fit together without needing any additional fixings. But after that, I did do a first layer test, which did unfortunately show a few small areas that just weren't as smooth as others. Now, there have been reports of inconsistent temperatures across the bed, and when I cracked out my thermal cam and watched it warm up, you can literally see where the heat is coming from. But after a few minutes, this appeared pretty consistent across the whole plate. Now, I agree that this heating isn't perfectly even, but practically I haven't had any noticeable adhesion issues with this machine. But yes, I will agree there are printers out there with better approaches to bed heating. A popular method now is having separate zones that heat independently depending on how much of the bed you're using. TLDR, for me, this works fine, but I agree it could be better. Now, coming on to benches, I have actually printed benches using different nozzles just to get an idea of what the speed and quality was like from each. So feel free to pause these screens here, but I've done 0.2, 0.4, 0.6 and 0.8, and these were all done using the default layer heights and values for each nozzle size. However, I also need to show off this awesome Power Claw print from Alex Geek Workshop. This was printed without supports and again requires absolutely no fixings to assemble or operate. And this is all PLA and it is stupidly satisfying to play with. I even made a second one, and you're now looking at Commissar Zoidberg. Now, coming back to the printer, the last thing I like about the inside, and this is a small thing again, it's that the bottom is flat, unlike the older X and P series printers. And the value of this is when errant bits of filament get dropped in here, you can just sweep them out. It's the small things that make me happy. Now finally, the AMS. It's just like the original AMS, but it's been upgraded. So the benefits are you've now got direct access to the internal PTFE tubes, which means it's easier to deal with inevitable blockages. And just like the H2 printers, there are now compression buttons everywhere, so you no longer need printed tools to remove these tubes and access stuck filament. But the absolute best part is the heater. Unlike other filament heaters that get hot and just cause the moisture to evaporate from the filament into the air but stay stuck in the chamber only to rehydrate the filament and or desiccant afterwards, this one has vents that open when you start a drying cycle. So not only does this properly dry your filament, it also dries out your desiccant beads too, keeping the humidity lower for longer, and the printer even tells you right on the display how high or low the humidity is at all times. So let's conclude. And before I do, I think it's obvious, but I have to say, Bambu sent me this printer free for review, but my thoughts are entirely my own. If you don't believe me, go and watch the H2D review. But in saying that, I've been accused of being a Bambu fanboy, and well, yeah, I'll happily admit it, I'm a huge Bambu fan. When a brand delivers a user experience this good, it's hard not to be. But I at least hope what I'm about to say will prove that whilst I am a card-carrying Bambu fan, I'm not a Bambu shill. So here it is. With the H2S now being available in the form it's been delivered in, there's no longer a clear good, better, best path with Bambu, and that is a bit of a misstep. When it comes to the H2 range, it's more about pick what you want to be limited by. Pick the H2S, but know that you can never upgrade it to the H2D later down the line. Or perhaps you're thinking you may want to try out lasers in future. Well, you can, but you have to know now that you're only ever going to be limited to that 10 watt laser. Unless this power supply is big enough for a 20 watt and they're going to release that in the future. I hope so, I genuinely don't know, but yeah, with all the other brands releasing 20 watts now, it'd be good for Bambu to weirdly catch up, despite this being brand new. It's their first laser, let them have it. But the other option is pick the H2D, and you'll have access to the current ultimate range of features, but you will be constantly reminded of the extra build area in the slicer that you'll rarely use, and that feels limiting every time you go to print something. But I want to ask you now, what matters more to you? Before I tell you my preference, I'd love it if you could pause this video and tell me what your preference is. Drop it down in the comments. What do you want more? Which one would you choose? And most importantly, why? Because if you're anything like me, it'll be the H2S. Now don't get me wrong, I do love the D, as I've said, and that's now 2 opportunities you've had to pick up on that double entendre. But I love the H2D for its dual nozzle, and I love dual nozzle for one reason: quickly swapping to support material. But I actually use that so rarely that I'll be happy to sacrifice it for a little bit more build space. As a home hobbyist, that extra space means I can print bigger things with less pissing about, or more things on one plate, which means fewer trips back to the machine mid-project. So as much as I like the idea of 2 separate nozzles, I would have just preferred them to be on 2 independent print heads and have Bambu engineer that for us. Maybe even have it so the parked one can purge while the other one's printing. That's what I expected Bambu to do. Because the thing is, having used the H2D for a few months now, one thing I know is that model creators just aren't designing with the H2D's odd bed shape in mind. In reality, we're often capped at 325 or 300mm width for most prints, with the slicer kindly reminding us of all that wasted space every time we open it. So yeah, between the two, I'd take the H2S, and I think most future H-series buyers will do the same. I expect this will be the majority pick over the H2D for most people, and I expect it's also the printer that many of you have been waiting for. But the trade-off is, yeah, we're locking ourselves out of ever upgrading to the 40-watt laser. And when I first saw lasers as an option on the H2D, it did feel like a bit of a gimmick, but after spending time with a few laser machines, I can already see the potential, and I can promise you, it's only going to get harder to ignore. I just can't help but wonder how much extra it would have cost us or Bambu to keep the bigger power supply in this and give us the full choice later down the line. For me, the H2S wins on build volume and simplicity, and I'd still pick it over the D without hesitation. But yeah, that doesn't mean I won't get a little bit of laser FOMO when I see what the 40-watt crowd are doing. I want to finish by saying if this video was helpful, entertaining, or ideally both, and you decide to buy a H2S or H2D, I'd really appreciate it if you would use my affiliate link in the description before making a purchase. It won't cost you a penny, but I'll earn a commission which helps me keep making these videos. And speaking of lasers, well, as I said, that video's up next, so make sure you stick around and don't miss it. There's more than meets the eye. If I hum it, I can't get demonetized. Anyway, I want to say thanks for watching, with a huge thanks going to our channel members who are on screen now. They get their name in lights along with early access and exclusive videos. Please consider joining them by becoming a member of the channel. Thanks again for watching, and until next time, in fact, no, we're not done with this machine. Go and watch the H2 laser video. If it doesn't automatically pop up next, there's a link in the description. See you soon.